You are listening to the 100th episode of the OT Potential podcast. So I just wanted to hop on here and say thank you to you, our listeners. I have just truly cherished all the feedback and conversations that have taken place here. For our 100th episode, I wanted to do a topic that is close to my heart, owning an OT business. And I wanted the episode to be driven by your questions. So I am proud to present our Ask Me Anything episode that was recorded live on February 28th, 2025. Welcome to the OT Potential Podcast. Before we begin, I wanted to let you know that this podcast may qualify as continuing education for you. You are probably listening to this podcast on a free podcast platform. But to gain CEU credit, you will need to be a member of the OT Potential Club, our OT continuing education platform. After listening, you can log into the club to take a 5-question quiz, and we will generate a certificate for your time today. Okay, here we go.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the OT Potential Podcast. And this episode, live AMA, starting an OT private practice with Carline Reaume. Dr. Carline Reaume is a pelvic floor therapist, and specialist, right?
That's right. Yes, absolutely.
In Sacramento, California, Carline launched Supported Mama Pelvic Floor Therapy in 2020 as a way to provide holistic support for women on the journey before, during, and after pregnancy. Hi, Carline. How you doing?
Hello. Good morning. I'm great. I'm really happy to be here. Very excited that this is the 100th episode of OT Potential, so can't think of a better way to celebrate. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yes, me too. So excited to have you. And also, our other member, guest person, CEO of OT Potential is here. Sarah Lyon, OTRL, is the CEO of OT Potential and is on a mission to bridge the gap between research and real occupational therapy practice. Hi, Sarah.
Hello. I am so thankful to be here today, too. This has been a topic that, one, has been requested by our members multiple times. And two, just hits so close to home. I think it's so important for every single OT to consider owning their own practice as a continuing education provider and getting to peek into different practice areas. I just see over and over how many just unmet needs there are in our communities, and private practice is a way for you to meet those. And then as an individual, a private practice just gives you such a sense of agency and personal growth. And even when you try things and fail, at least it's your own failure. And it's just a great feeling to own one. And I also think of the bigger context right now, especially here in the United States, where some of our funding feels uncertain, but always you never know what can happen with your job, and having that side hustle private practice gives you something to pivot towards. So excited for all those reasons to be here, and excited to be here with Carline because she just, to me, exemplifies what this can look like to start out something small on the side and just keep going. I think that's something we'll talk about a lot today, but just keeping going is the key. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I think it's going to be good. I'm your host. I will be fielding questions from you in the comments, as well as some that we have seen come through over the past couple of weeks on OT Potential and other places as well. I'm Alan Linick, and we want to answer your questions specifically about starting a therapy practice today. So we're going to try to follow a general flow of the logistics of getting started, and then into the marketing side of your practice, and finally retaining your patients and sort of growing your practice from there. We actually have a pre-recorded question that was sent in from Kim Eberly in Aurora, Nebraska. Kim?
Hello. Thanks for letting me come on. I'm just so excited to be a part of this 100th episode. I'm so proud of this whole podcast. I just love everything about the community that was created and just this resource that is invaluable for us as OT professionals. So thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Mitchell, for getting this going. I just have a question. How do you get from an idea to having this fantabulous thing happening?
Great
Carlin,
question.
I'll let you take that from the top, but I have to say that Kim is my friend here in Aurora, Nebraska, and she has helped me since I was literally in high school through my OT journey. So I'm really thankful to hear from her today.
Yeah, that was a great question, Kim. Thank you. How do you go from an idea to getting started? I think for me, with my business, Supported Mama, so my daughter was born in 2019. And prior to that, I had worked in mental health, lifestyle redesign, ergonomics. I had a background teaching Pilates and yoga. And so when I gave birth to my daughter, just that process of pregnancy, delivery, postpartum, I really felt like I wanted to engage with somebody who had my similar background and could help support me in this very specific way. And I couldn't do it for myself in that moment, right? In the postpartum kind of haze of things. And so how it started was just such a clear idea, such a deep, like there was a desperate need there for me personally. And as I started connecting with other people who had given birth, I recognized how critical this need was. And so I feel really grateful that I've had that passion and the clarity of the vision, just knowing that something needed to be out in the world, some kind of business, some kind of service. And that really helped me continue to just keep plowing forth. And so it wasn't like a magical, all of a sudden it launched. And I think this is important to just share because I feel like sometimes from the outside, it can feel like people are just launching businesses right and left. But I had this idea, I remember talking about it like when she was about 2 months old, saying, I feel like this needs to happen. And so then I started putting pieces in place, learning a little bit more, diving into areas that I knew I felt weaker in. And so it wasn't until, the next year that I figured out, okay, I need a name, I need a website. And then I filed the paperwork. And I remember that distinct memory of filing the official business paperwork. And I thought, have I started now? Like, is this official? And I thought, okay, well, officially I've started because the state has my business paperwork, but nobody knows that I'm doing this. Like, am I yet official? What does that even mean? So then it was a while more before like launching my website and then sharing on social media, hey, this exists, and trying to get a client. And so it was a long phase of starting. It wasn't like automatically I, opened doors and was open for business. And so I would say the process was like one foot in front of the other, just like step by step moving forward and just being persistent with it.
I think it's interesting to hear you describe it that way because I think it is often the case of making or building anything that from the outside looking in, you see the thing once it's done, and you think to yourself, wow, that it just appeared, like it was made.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
the idea of going from nothing to something is so overwhelming sometimes because we're not often directly in contact with the process.
Right.
So actually undertaking it for yourself feels daunting and strange because all you ever really see is the practice, right? You don't get to watch people go through the process of building.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's really cool to hear you sort of describe it in that incremental way. Was there a moment where you felt like this is it, now I've done it, like
yeah,
I feel like it's made?
You know what? I'm going to kind of say no. And I think
you're still waiting for that?
Yeah, like I feel like that's really important to share here because I can look back on the successes and see the growth, and I feel like I'm now closer to it than ever I was before, but I still see much more growth, much more possibility. So I recognize these little like milestones of it. It was the filing of the paperwork, the social media announcement, my very first client, like friend client, and then my first like paying client. And then I started virtual and, in-home services. And then I got a brick and mortar practice. And so when I got keys to a physical location, that was a huge milestone, but I still didn't have a ton of people coming through the door. So I'm like, am I a business? Like I have a business space, but what is this? So as my business continues to grow, I continue to have these different like developmental milestones, if you will. So it's continuing to be a journey for sure.
I think so many OTs have the idea or like have the thing that they are passionate about and wish they could pursue, but then they get stuck at that, like, how do I start? And I want to be like, you have already started because you've done the most important thing, which is having the idea and having the passion. So You're already on the way. You just take the next step. I also, as I look out at the resources out there for getting started, um, I've been tracking this for years on a blog post, and every year there's more resources out there. So you truly can find like a pathway or checklists to get you going if that is helpful. But at the end of the day, you're never going to find the perfect checklist because one, every state is different and your specific practice will have its own considerations. So you can find a guide or some support, but at the end of the day, it's about taking the plunge and just doing it yourself and learning through doing, I guess. Did you have like a spreadsheet or a guide when you started, Carlin? Like,
I had many spreadsheets, many Google Docs, lots of different ideas, places to brainstorm, places where I was trying to like consolidate information. But I really think that's it. What you just said, Sarah. I was trying to create my own guide in a way that was very specific. But then I came to a point where I realized how much effort I was putting in towards these guides and checklists to make sure I was doing everything correctly. And I thought, no, I just need to be out. Like I need to be out and delivering care and talking to people about what I'm doing rather than trying to refine all of my processes and make sure everything's perfect before I start. So that was a mental shift. I had to like get away from my Google Docs and spreadsheets and research and actually like do and provide care.
Mhm. I had no plan when I started my business too. Like you can do either. You can have your plan or I did not have a plan. And I actually feel like I've benefited from that because I didn't have a set vision of what it would look like. So I just always did the next right thing. And now I'm doing live webinars and I wouldn't have known that that was a thing 10 years ago. So either way works and there's benefits to either way.
Well, it feels like the overlap in the Venn diagram then between the two of you, and correct me if I'm wrong there, is that there is this desire, like the practice or OT potential was a means to continue doing the thing that actually drove you in the first place, right? Like Carlin, you sort of mentioned like I wanted to get out there and provide care. So that sort of naturally led you towards a practice instead of the practice being the goal in and of itself. Does that sound like anything?
I remember thinking that a lot when I started of just like, if I want to keep doing this and a business is how you make something sustainable.
Gotcha. I do want to circle back. We've got a question from Ruth from our live chat here on the AMA. You mentioned a bunch of these milestones, Carlin, that you sort of like accrued or like would notice as they happened. And the first client, I'll say non-friend client, was one of them that you listed. Do you want to take like a second just to describe that experience? Did that person know they were the first? Is it a client or a patient that you still see today? Like, would you care to comment on that?
Yeah, great question. So no, they did not know they were my first paying client. That felt important to me from an embodiment ownership perspective. Like I knew if I communicated that. So I have this background in performing, and not to say that anything is like disingenuine, but I knew if I like put on the coat or the hat or the sweater, whatever, of somebody who'd been in practice and was showing up to a session of I've done this before, I know this work. Like that was a different way to approach that client than if I was like, oh, I haven't done this before. You're the first person who's paying me money. Like I knew I would show up like energetically into the space differently. So I didn't communicate that. And I'm also thinking actually back to the first person that I saw in my clinic space, my physical clinic space. And looking back for both of those interactions, I was very awkward. Even though I was trying to put on this like presence that I had done this a million times before, I can see how much growth has happened since that time. And it was still, those clients were still appreciative. They had value from those sessions. And I learned so much through it. Like what my own little systems needed to be, things I needed to tweak, things I wanted to communicate. So it was a messy part of the process, but for me, I didn't let them know that they were my first my first client, that just felt like an important part of it for me.
Gotcha. And how long? So this is another question from the chat, and obviously, with a grain of salt for this one, because it maybe shouldn't be used as a model. Everyone's process is going to be different depending on where they are, what kind of practice they want to start, etc. But Jessica in the chat is wondering how long it took from initial filing of your business paperwork to full-time work through your practice.
Well, I will share that I have had another full-time position consistently. So I have been working in academia consistently since I started my business as well. So Supported Mama has been in that way kind of a part-time venture, which has been tricky in and of itself to do those two things. So Supported Mama is not yet full-time for me. I still have another role. So still in process, I guess, is the answer for that one. But I mean, the income for sure has been, exponentially coming in as I've grown. But that's where I do want to say, like, I have to know that my trajectory looks different than if somebody were completely focused on growing their private practice. Like, I have to give myself grace because I was really stressed out about those numbers and how much I was making. And there was something about that I was finding almost like overwhelming and paralyzing. I felt like I couldn't move forward because, oh my gosh, I'm not making enough money. I'm not bringing in enough clients. And when I kind of released that a little bit and refocused on my mission and just, I really want to support people through parenthood and through motherhood and help with their pelvic floor issues. When I shifted that to the focus, my income has steadily increased, and it's taking a little bit of that financial pressure off of me feeling like I need to grow exponentially.
I wanted to be sure to say too, that first year of business, 20% of businesses do fail. And part of the reason I wanted to have Carlin on is because she's had that exponential, that slow trajectory. And even if you commit like full-time all the way, your first year is a slow year because you have the upfront costs of legal fees, your logo. You don't have the flow of clients. So when you're getting started, just plan for that first year to be a slow year and really think about that exponential growth chart in your head. Like, just because it starts out slow doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong. That is just what that curve looks like. And that to me is, I would always tell someone, like, start while you are still working. Or if you have like money set aside to plan on that first year. I started a business an OT business in a different area. And I also had that, like, I worked so hard and hardly made any money that first year. But just like Carlin, have enjoyed that exponential growth that you just have to keep going and get through that first year, and just plan for it to be slow.
Yeah, it seems like there's some people in the chat reflecting these concerns of like the hurdles of getting started, right? That they can be so high sometimes to seem as barriers in terms of upfront costs. I'm seeing a lot of people are asking about legal issues and health insurance, that sort of thing. I'm going to try to consolidate a lot of these sort of like barrier to entry fears and concerns into one question somehow. Wish me luck. So I'm going to pose this from Melissa Kimmerling. From this question is, I'll just read the whole thing. Hi, my biggest barrier is concern for health insurance. What other resources exist to prevent this from being a barrier to taking the dive?
I think the fundamentals of what we just talked about. I'm going to share in the chat. There's this, or I'll have Brooke share. There's an awesome capstone student that had a pathway to practice document that she created that really walks you through the fundamentals of getting going, where you like file the legal paperwork, or get your payment systems up, create a website. I personally would start with those fundamentals first. And I think people get so worried about what about insurance. If it was me, I would start cash-based because it's easier. And then once you know that it works, that there's a need, then tackle insurance if you're looking to start easy, and just remove that as one of those initial barriers. unless you have some upfront money set aside and you're able to go all in, start slow, tackle insurance later. What do you think of that, Carlin? I know that that sounds like limiting access. I think you could also think about like pro bono clients, but there's so much to tackle. Give yourself grace and do the fundamentals first.
Yes, I think that's significant. I think when I started, I wanted to do it all for everybody because I care so much about the work. And then I realized that that is a quick way, like a path to burnout. And so I needed to reel it in and recognize I do want I want these services to be accessible, and I also need to figure out what bandwidth I have, when you add in billing insurance and denials and rebutting denial, and all of that, with my available time and brain energy, thinking about what makes the most sense for me right now at this stage in my business. And what I'm doing now doesn't mean it's what it's going to look like in 3 years, 5 years, or more. So I do think that cash pay does allow for a lot more flexibility. And I've found that to be very helpful. And then in terms of providing access, or other opportunities where you can still get your name out there, you can do all of those things. That has led me to be really creative and establish some really great community partnerships where I'm providing educational workshops, or, maybe sliding scale or consulting services, or some way where I'm providing access and, letting people know about services without that direct cash pay barrier. So I think there's space to be creative there as well.
Tara is curious, what would be the most important legal things to think about before providing parent groups on feeding, so not individual therapy? And I want to drill into that, but I think also broaden that question into just the legal issue in general, and things that you discovered or have advice about for people considering starting their own practice and looking at legal issues as a hurdle.
Mm-hmm. I think something I would highly recommend is connecting with other therapists in your state, other entrepreneurs in your state, and whether that's through your state's professional association, whether that's in some other kind of, social media platform or forum, that has been hugely helpful because people will know and have access to the specific information about what practice looks like and what the restrictions are, what the requirements are, et cetera. So that has been hugely helpful to connect with other I'm in Sacramento, so other California-based practice owners to at least know the starting points, or what is my specific question? Has anybody else had that question? How have they navigated it? That's that's what I would recommend as a first step.
Mm-hmm. I would add too, I used to be so intimidated by the legal stuff. I now have had like a mindset shift where I'm like, I kind of love it because it's hoops to jump through, and makes me feel like I'm in grad school kind of. I found an attorney that I just really enjoy who has a really reasonable fee. So I love reaching out to her. And I tried to do as much research and have a really well-crafted question for her so she doesn't have to spend that much time on it. But I've come to really actually enjoy that part of my practice. I know that AOTA just came out with a post. I'll link to this I'll add this to my Start a Therapy Practice guide with the 4 kind of basic business entity structures that you can consider. But as we've mentioned, there are state-by-state considerations. So connecting with therapists in your state, and then just finding an attorney that you enjoy to work with. And that is definitely something I would set aside money for. You probably need a couple thousand to get going. And the legal fee is a big part of that chunk.
Okay, as someone who hates hoops, you almost
love
make
hoops.
them sound. I know you.
I love the hoops.
I'm like, oh, maybe I should try jumping through some. No, I don't think so. But I'm proud of you. It seems like, and a lot of these concerns revolve around that you're asked if you're trying to start your own thing. You're your employee and you're your boss, and everything kind of revolves around you. You're your accountant, you're your marketer, it's just a lot of hats to wear at once, and or take off and on and carry around in a little hat bag. And I guess having this sort of planning going into it can help alleviate a lot of the stress of that. So I want to end our section on the logistics of getting started with a question from Jessica, which is, how do you draft a pragmatic business plan? I think like achievability obviously ties into that, but also something that has like push goals and set dates. So how do you sit down and like look at something big like this and break it down into a business plan?
I'm trying to remember if I actually had like a physical business plan. I mean, I'm sure in all of my Google Docs, there was some version of that. But, I've had actually some students who've reached out and they've asked me about my like final business plan document. And it never made it into that like a concise, nice one single document. So I think it's been this action of like brainstorming, putting pieces out, like trying to think of what are the most important pieces here. Like, what do I actually need in order to get started? I need to think about how am I marketing? Who are my like what service am I offering? Who's my ideal client population? Like some of those kind of more foundational pieces. And then for me, because I tend towards perfectionism, I needed to release some of what I felt like needed to be in a comprehensive business plan and just say, okay, this is like where I think I need to start. And my motto was take imperfect action. That was like, I needed that for me, just take imperfect action and do it. So I did come up with, kind of a basic vision and mission and who my ideal client was. Truth be told, I think now if I were starting my business, I would use ChatGPT to help me. I don't even think that was available, or if it was, I didn't know about it, but I think I would use that to kind of like play with and see what resonated and didn't resonate when I got started.
Yeah. And I think I also did not have a business plan. I think going back, I would have written down like the 10 things I needed to do and just do them when I need to do them, which is kind of what you kind of, as you get going, it feels like there's the next thing and it kind of naturally leads you to that. But do not wait until you have a business plan. Just start on the first thing. And maybe there's a long lag of like you file your paperwork and it doesn't come together for 6 months. That's fine. Like, just do the next thing when you're ready for it. And don't wait till it's perfectly formulated, because that your perfectly formulated idea is going to become obsolete anyway.
Yeah, I want to actually really quick before we move on, I want to circle back because I think AI is something Carlin mentioned, and it's a really interesting, weird tool that can be extremely helpful and useful, but also is like not always super trustworthy. So I'm curious, Carlin, if you were gonna like, start your process over today, you mentioned like incorporating ChatGPT. How would you use tools like AI options to have helped you if you had started now?
Yeah. I think I think I would ask it some general questions like, what elements should I have in a business plan for me, or whatever it is, and use it. I like to use it when I do use it as kind of a jumping off point for brainstorming. Like it at times can help me kind of organize my thoughts, or sometimes it will provide answers that I'm like, that feels way off, and so then I'm like, okay, what is off about that? And that process helps me refine what I'm, the direction I'm wanting to go in and that kind of thing. So I think I would use it kind of freely as a tool to just help me feel like I'm getting unstuck. Because I know that I found myself just, I would sit in front of a computer or feeling like I should be doing something, or I don't even know what this is. And so I feel like I would use it as like a little unstuck support mechanism, possibly.
Oh man, I identify with that super hard. There's nothing worse than like staring at a blank page or a blank document or whatever and being like, your brain is like, okay, let her rip, and you're like, I don't what. There's nothing. Trying to make something from nothing is so much harder than having a jumping off point, even if it's wrong or dumb or like, it's so much easier to iterate than it is to create a lot of the times. Okay, so we are going to move on to our second leg of this AMA, which is going to focus on marketing your private practice. So to get us rolling, Sarah and Carlin, what advice do you have for getting that first client in the door?
Well, okay. For me, it started with just putting myself out there, becoming comfortable with the being uncomfortable of just sharing. So, if you go to a coffee shop and they're like, "Hey, what do you have going on today?" I would use that as a starting space to just say, I'm about to head into my business, or this is my business, or I'm working on my business. And they say, "What's your business?" And I would just practice, like, what is my service that I'm offering? Who am I looking for? Just to become comfortable talking about it. And again, because I'm so passionate about all things maternal health, pelvic floor therapy, it's this natural conversation starter. So the more that I talk about it, people in the community say, "Oh, I wish I had known someone like you," or "I have a friend," or, so that was my starting point. And that's actually how I got my first paying client it was when I was offering packages of, it was a group of friends who rallied together and gifted their pregnant friend my services for her baby shower. And that was really significant. And I was deeply touched by that, but it was just because I was talking about it more and more. So to get out there and start having the conversation.
Yeah, it does seem like your first clients will come from your circle. I see so clearly this trend of OT practices that are succeeding. To me, it all comes back to that website, though, which feels more impersonal, like not as personable. But to me, that is your future key to marketing is your website. I all the time am Googling like pelvic floor therapy Sacramento and seeing who shows up at the top. And just so consistently, the people who rank towards the top of that, your city plus your practice area, that is how you get that steady flow. And ideally, you have your Google My Business profile and then your website comes up. I have a blog post on OT websites I'm going to update next week, but it is so important when you're making your website just that it clearly says your location, what problems you solve. No one Googles occupational therapy, they Google back pain, pelvic floor therapy, feeding therapy. They're looking for answers to specific problems. So you just have to reflect that language on your website. And that, again, it just takes a while to get those reviews, get that ranking. And that's why it's slow. But once you get there, you just get that steady flow. And that's, again, why you have that exponential growth curve is once you build that machine, it just keeps getting fed.
Got a question that I think kind of interestingly ties into this idea of knowing that your initial business is going to come sort of through your personal network or your social network, people you already know, needs that you know need to be filled, that sort of thing, and translating that into a marketing plan or experience. So Sydney asks, how to do a market analysis that you know is accurate versus I just have a feeling this is a need based on the experiences of a few that I've heard of.
I love keyword research tools. I think you have to make a Google AdWords account, but Google will let you use it's called a keyword research tool, and just see how many people are Googling a specific topic. So you can see how many people are Googling pelvic floor therapy in Sacramento. And you should be able to see like there are people Googling that every single month. If your thing is so specific that no one is Googling it, you might want to think about that next level broader. The other thing we haven't talked about, Carlin, too, with marketing is the other possible direction is that one consistent referral source. And knowing that there is someone who is seeing the need and doesn't have anyone to send to. I just recorded a podcast on sleep therapy that will come out. Please, anyone interested in mental health, listen to this. But she just has a relationship with one PA who was doing all the sleep studies and then did not have anyone to refer on to. So that is her flow of how to get clients.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that referral stream and marketing. I'm looping in a couple of things. So something that, in addition to communicating at the coffee shop and to close friends, I also have been participating in several different like local groups. So there's one called Powered by Women, and it's for, female entrepreneurs in the Sacramento area. There's a couple of other kind of entrepreneurship or maternal health or mother groups that I've been consistently going to. And so people start to get to know me, or like birth workers collectives, those kinds of things. They get to know me. And so they themselves know the kind of person I am, the type of work that I do. So that has been good from a marketing perspective, but also within each of those spaces, I have at least one person who's consistently referring. So from like the birth worker collective, I have this one midwife who really they've been consistently referring their clients to me. I have a local OB who's consistently referring. I have some other, like a prenatal masseuse who consistently refers. And so I do think I spend a lot of my time, not a lot of my time, but I definitely dedicate time to coffee dates with people in my community. And that has been marketing time well spent. It's like focused, a 1 hour time where I connect with like a mental health therapist, like a talk therapist, social worker, or whatever else who might work with the perinatal population. And then I get so many referrals that way. And we know how we work. They recognize which clients might be a good fit for my services versus something else. So I think those touch points have been really significant for referral streams, and where it's made sense for me to spend like my marketing efforts.
Always stay focused on that website, but then it feels like marketing is some trial and error, and then keep doing what works, because you're going to try things that don't work.
Can I add quickly about the website? Like I am not a website person. Like I feel like, Sarah, you're a little bit more like tech inclined. And so only through us, through us becoming friends and connecting, you've really pushed me on the tech side, because my norm would not be like, oh, focus on the website.
Yeah.
But I now know it's important to focus on the website. And I will say, since I kind of followed your advice and support, that has been significant. And now people are finding me from Google. And I've pushed myself to get some more Google reviews and all of that. And that has raised my presence. And so much more frequently now people say, oh, when I ask, how did you hear about me, or whatever it is, it's like, oh yeah, you just popped up on Google. It's not necessarily a referral from a trusted colleague in the area. So that does work, and that it took a minute, but it really has been significant now. So thank you for that.
Cool.
So I'm curious. This is a follow-up question from me. I can do that. That's right. I don't have to just read other people's questions. I can come up with my own when I'm curious. And here's one that I have for you, Carlin. At this point, when you look at your practice and on an average day, the patients that you see and the clients that visit you, how do you look at the percentage of like, oh, these are people that have come through my personal network or referral streams that I've set up, or people that know people that I, sort of an extension of your individual presence, versus the percentage of clients or patients that you see that are like, yeah, I just found you thanks to SEO or a website or Google or whatever.
I'm going to approximate it's about 50-50 now.
And I'm assuming that's a significant difference than when you started.
That's a huge difference. Yeah. Yep. I would say it's, pretty consistently about half.
So then it does seem like point for Sarah, because
that's right.
It does seem like in terms of growth and sustainability, there is a sense of like, if at some point you hit the wall on your reach individually within a community, right? And then the way out beyond that sounds like this is me speculating wildly. The way out beyond that is what can systems that already exist, Google, are there other things?
A lot of Google.
A lot of different Google platforms bring people towards you in that way. Is that?
Yep. And that's that exponential growth of like, it takes a while for those systems to start working. But once they do, it can just take off from there, which you just got to keep going. And it's so hard in that first year to go through those learning lessons, but you just got to keep going.
Can I add though to that is I think that those are the kinds of tasks when you're getting started where you might not have a ton of clients. You have some time in your day and you think, okay, I really want to work on my business, and you dabble in a little of this and you think about your forms and your processes, but is there space to then devote to some tweaking of your tech, the SEO portion? And I think that was great because some of the focus that we had on that aligned with when I had space in my schedule to dive into that piece a little bit more. So I do think that's something to just have in your mind, as it can be on your list and you can work through it when and if you have time, or when you have the time to build it.
Actually, I want to bridge that thought into moving into our sort of final discussion segment for starting private practice, which is in retaining clients, because you sort of mentioned when you start is going to be the smallest you're going to be, right? That's when you have the fewest clients. It's when you have had the least opportunity to grow and invest. You've just naturally put the least amount of time so far into the thing you're building that you're going to have put into it. So I imagine that retaining the clients that you already have is a pretty high priority, right? It's not just focused on growing by adding people in. It's well, I've got 10. I really need these 10. I can't not have them, right? So curious to see what kinds of questions we can get, or that people have been sitting on in terms of retaining clients. But to get us rolling, Sarah and Carlin, what advice do you have for getting your clients to come back, getting these sort of initial first visits to keep returning to your practice and becoming part of the structure of your private practice?
I'm going to give Doug Vestal a shout out here, because I was in this space for quite a while where I would have people come for their initial session, and I felt panic is too strong of a word, but I didn't want to feel salesy. I know that because I'm private pay that it's expensive services. And I felt like I didn't want to rope them in to needing to pay. I didn't want to have an awkward exchange at the end. And so I would just say, okay, well, here's a general recommendation. You let me know when you're ready to book again. And then that was it, right? Until they've had another pregnancy or whatever else. And sometimes they've circled back around. But I had a conversation with Doug, and he was just so let me understand, you don't, before they leave, you don't schedule them for their next appointment. I'm no, I haven't been doing that consistently. And he helped me kind of reframe it in a way that didn't feel salesy, which is true, because I'm passionate about it. I want to support people. My schedule does get full. I came up with something along the lines of, in order for you to get a time that works for you within my schedule, let's get something on the calendar. And that approach to it felt so much easier for me. It didn't feel salesy. It just felt realistic. We're two busy people. We're trying to coordinate schedules. I've outlined a proposed plan of care. And so before they left, they would have their next session or two scheduled. And I always would say, people needed to reschedule, needed to cancel, that's fine. But at least we had that on the books. And when I started implementing that consistently is when my practice just that was a huge game changer for me. And so that was it. That
okay,
was the thing.
Be honest. On their way out, if someone's no, I'm good, do you lock the doors, or what do you...
I just cry.
Oh, you go the Puss in Boots emotional manipulation route?
No, it's been really great. It was really a significant shift. And and it's also helped with a mindset thing where I recognize, again, stepping into the fact that my services are valuable and I want to support people over time, and we can't cover it all in one session. And so I'm doing I'm doing a service. I'm helping that person over time in a fully supported way, which is what my business is about. If I set you up here, let's get this on the schedule. It's easiest for all of us, so that was significant. I will say with my practice, and this will be the last thing I say for now, is that given that I'm tending to work with people around pregnancy and postpartum, my practice isn't one where it's like I have clients and then I have them like forever ongoing. So I really do have kind of like a rotating population, but people tend to have kids again or know somebody who has a pelvic floor dysfunction, or so I'm not feeling like I need to like hang on to my people. I trust that it will, like, just with the seasons of life, there will be people that cycle through. So I feel like my practice might be a little bit different than some other practice areas in a way.
Sarah, I was going to say, I'm assuming we have some kind of website related advice that
Well, I do want to relate this back to your tech stack because, like, as Carlin's mentioning, like, she has to ask, but then you have to have the system where you're plugging it into your calendar. And I'm seeing so many questions about EMRs, and I know that that is one of the main barriers to getting going is that tech stack, your EMR, your billing, your scheduling. And to be frank, I think that historically has been a huge barrier. Like, it has been very hard to figure out. Is I'm in a lucky spot where I get to meet with a lot of EMR companies, and I see the new iterations that are coming out this year. And there are truly going to be better solutions for you where everything is integrated from your scribe, where it's listening to you and it's starting your note to you. It's going to be your EMR. It's going to be your scheduler. It's going to be your revenue cycle management. It's going to be watching where, if they're billing insurance, do you have the right parts in it? These services are going to be amazing. Honestly, a lot of them are in beta testing right now, but I think that they will be out like by 2025. So this part is about to get easier. And there's a new payment model for a lot of them where they take a cut of your billing so you don't have to pay up front. They take 7 or 8% of what you bill. I know that doesn't sound particularly helpful because I can't say like exact ones to use. I am working so hard on this blog post that like lists the 25 options that are out there. And then you really have to go look at the 25 and be like, which ones meet my priorities? Because everyone's going to have a different priority. There's no one right one for everyone. But this is actually an exciting time in the EMR tech stack space. Yeah, I could talk about that for a long time, but I will continue to update that post.
Well, I could listen to you talk about it because I have full disclosure. Halfway through this webinar, I Googled what an EMR is. So now I feel like I can
No, you don't.
I Googled tech stack too. So we're not.
And we're all always learning. I do.
I want to answer one more question related to that.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, one of the questions I've seen coming in, which I think is such a good question, is like a closer coordination with primary care and how you can be syncing with them. I'm like, I'm going to be thinking as I'm building my EMR chart of like which ones sync with your primary care the best, because I do think that is like the future opportunity for OTs is to really be honing that close relationship with our primary care providers. I also think there's going to be new payment options that aren't just insurance. They're going to be value-based care contracts. I think over the next couple of years, we're going to have a lot more value-based care payments where like the primary care provider gets a lump sum and then pays for low-cost services that help save money on patients. And that is OT. Everyone listen to our value-based care episode because that kind of links in there and like would push me towards an EMR that really syncs well with what a primary care provider is using. I might even try to just use the same EMR if that was where I wanted to go with my business.
Cool. I want to circle back to some questions we've gotten in the chat, just that we have had to move past for time for a few minutes. I'm seeing sort of a theme of questions revolving around a telehealth option, and I'm curious if you two have any thoughts on that, especially in this conversation about EMRs, which I obviously know what that is now. In terms of as well, certifications and stuff. We talked earlier about state by state things being different. So if we're looking to branch out into a telehealth option alongside in-person services, and then looking at billing across state lines for clients who may be, dialing in or zooming in from other places, other countries, wellness services as an OT for across state lines. What are some general thoughts or advice we can give on the telehealth side of private practice?
So if you are billing as an occupational therapist or providing services as an occupational therapist, and you are providing telehealth services, you must be licensed to provide care in the state where your client lives. So it doesn't matter where you're located, it matters where they're located. So if I'm in California, let's say somebody in Arizona was wanting to work with me, I would need to be licensed in Arizona, which I am not. So I do know some therapists that do have multiple licenses in different states, so they can provide telehealth in those states. There is a national licensure compact that I'm sure some of you all are familiar with, but can Google that on NBCOT or AOTA. There's information about the licensure compact and which states are a part of the compact, and when you can officially start providing services across state lines through the compact. So actually, I can send a follow-up, Sarah, and we can post that somewhere in this so people can find that information. But that is an option that will open up the ease of providing telehealth services across certain state lines. Not all states are a part of that compact.
I do think some therapists then have their OT business where, like Carlin was mentioning, where you have to be licensed in the state where your client is. And then next to that, they have a consulting business for like wellness, things that would not traditionally fall into the scope of OT. That is somewhere where I know people do it. I would definitely recommend getting legal advice for that. Honestly, it is a gray area because our laws were not built with telehealth in mind. People do that, and you are going to hit a gray area because our laws were not written to consider that. That is like a travesty of where we are at right now in our profession, because we have the technology to be sharing our expertise more broadly, and we are constrained by these outdated laws that unfortunately aren't going to get updated any rapidly. So it's possible, but you're a gray area and there's no easy answers, unfortunately.
A lot of our questions today have been focused on, how can you help grow a business? But I've got a really fun question here from Doug and Lindsay that sort of takes a reverse look at it.
Hey, Sarah and Carlin, thank you so much for having this discussion around private practice and entrepreneurship. So I'm Doug Vestal. This is my amazing wife, Lindsay Vestal. And there's a funny connection between Sarah and Lindsay, actually.
Yeah. So Sarah and I actually graduated from NYU together for occupational therapy school. And I got to tell you, I always felt a connection to her right from the beginning. And I'm not really surprised that we both ended up being entrepreneurs.
I know it's amazing that at least two of your graduating class ended up becoming entrepreneurs. And so the question I wanted to ask you is the same question I'm going to ask Sarah and Carlin. So in all of my coaching of OTs starting a private pay practice, I always tell them that it's fantastic for clients. Your clients are going to get really great results, but I see the most growth and transformation in the OTM themselves because it really requires a growth mindset. So I'd be curious, Lindsay, from your perspective, how has having a private pay practice forced you to grow personally?
Honestly, I think it's the fact that I had to wear all the hats from the beginning. I've never had a job where I've done that. And what drove me to be comfortable with all those hats was really seeing the impact that I can make on the community. The autonomy actually really fueled me. And I also became really obsessed with reshaping the future of occupational therapy within the context of the pelvic health community. What about you, Doug? Because you're an entrepreneur as well.
Yeah, I think for me, it really comes down to embracing the art of the possible. Entrepreneurship, private practice, you're having to create so many new things and push yourself outside your comfort zone that you really start to see that many things are possible once you get outside of your comfort zone. In the words of one of my students who did really good, she realized that you could be scared, but still do it anyways. So
That's awesome.
Carlin and Sarah, for both of you, so how has entrepreneurship sort of shaped you personally and required you really embracing that growth mindset?
That's such a great question. And I think that for sure, stepping outside of my comfort zone in many ways, building skill sets that I have maybe kind of historically shied away from, but just like learning a little bit about a variety of different things. Also, being able to recognize when I need to delegate or when I need more help, and being okay to ask for help. I really think I've grown in that. Yeah, just learning to embrace the fact that nothing's perfect. Like there is so much that's gray. There's so much that's gray. There's so much that's not exactly right. There are messy pieces of being an entrepreneur. And so that has been a really helpful, that in conjunction with parenthood and being a mom to my little, like that's been like powerful life lessons around all of that, So it's been such a great experience and really, a way in which I feel like I'm being able to give back to my professional community through this work, and a way that I like feel so deeply aligned with, like I've found the niche in OT that just like speaks to my soul. And so that feels incredibly fulfilling and exciting to continue to grow in this area.
Mm-hmm. I always advise people to take the self-compassion test by Kristen McNeff. I think being an entrepreneur means living in gray a lot of times. It means trial and error, like failing sometimes, like you're going to host something that no one shows up to. So to be self-aware about your level of self-compassion and know that either you're going to have to lean into it or grow it possibly as an entrepreneur. And then alongside that too is just like this sense of grit and to just keep going. Like that is my number one piece of advice. Like just keep going. You need time for your systems to build upon each other, for those referrals to start. You are going to feel like a failure to start with. That would be my big takeaways. Like one, you've already started because you have the ideas. So like you're never going to feel like I've started. Like just you've started because you're here and you have the ideas. And now just keep going. And I always tell people too, like we tend to totally overestimate what we can do in 1 year and we underestimate what we can do in 5 years. When you look with that longer time horizon, it truly is incredible. Like I've got to watch Carlin's business like go on that 5-year trajectory. I'm on a 10-year trajectory. Like you really just have to keep going and think long term, and it works. It tends to work, even though there's failures along the way.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to head towards the end here. Before we do, I want to shout out a question we had in the chat from Grace, which is about if there's a formal or known entrepreneur mentorship forum. I don't know, Sarah. To me, that sounds like something that maybe you could do on OT Potential somewhere, is create a talking point or place for OT entrepreneurs to meet and share their experiences. So that's not even a question. It's just a challenge. I'm throwing the gauntlet down for you to do something on that front. But the last question before we go, I think I'm going to direct to Carlin. First of all, Carlin, thank you so much for being here. And also, as a reminder to everyone, there will be a link to take the post-course quiz for this episode that will be dropping in the chat. So don't forget to do that so you can get your course credit. But the last question we have for today is, what is, of all the things we talked about in this webinar and all the questions that we saw, what would be, if there was only one thing that all of us retained or remembered or took away from this conversation, what would you want it to be? What one thing do you think sort of encapsulates this idea of starting the OT private practice?
Mm-hmm. I think our conversation has been a really good example of the fact that there is not one right way, that it can look lots of different ways. There are lots of different paths, different options. And so I would say move forward consistently, and go with what feels right for you and what is available to you. Just keep moving forward. And I think this, being open to shifting, being open to getting new information, incorporating it, that's something that you just know is part of the process. And so you'll bring that in as you continue to move forward. But just be patient, have grit, have grace, dive in.
Love that. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this webinar. Special thank you to Dr. Carlin Reaume. And Sarah and I have practiced a coordinated bye, like a goodbye moment. So this is what it looks like. 3,
This has been practiced.
2, 1. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you for joining us on the OT Potential Podcast. To earn 1 hour of AOTA-approved continuing education for your time today, you will need to sign in or sign up at otpotential.com. Once you're in the OT Potential Club, you will find a 5-question post-course quiz connected to this episode. When you pass the quiz with a score of 75% or higher, you will be able to download a PDF certificate that certifies your completion of this course. Okay, I want to thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.